Morning, folks. Thanks very much for taking the time to join this session this morning. It should be an information-packed meeting. So I think there's still some folks joining, but we'll get cracking right away. So we're, for those of you who haven't met us before, my name's Dan. This is Daniel. We're from Tech. We are almost entirely dedicated to serving accountants and helping them to adopt new technologies and ways of working. And we're also joined by Marc, who is from Intapp, even though his name is Matt Davis for the purposes of a demo session later. Remember, Matt is Marc. We can all get through this.
And we are recording this. If you have any comments about that, please just let us know. But we record it because lots of people asked us for a copy at the end of the session, so we will share that.
Exactly. So you'll be able to share the session from a YouTube link for any colleagues or relatives who you want to experience this goodness as well. So let's get straight into the meat of this session. The idea today is that we're going to talk about the issues that can be experienced with attempting to adopt Teams when you want to actually share documents and collaborate. Teams is a very, very powerful system when it comes to collaboration and sharing documents and all that sort of stuff, but it can become unruly pretty quickly. So let's take a look at the challenges and the solutions that the market has come up with. So we'll start off with, as I say, some of the typical challenges that accountancy practices experience, and then we'll hand over to Marc or Matt, whichever he's identifying as today, in order to talk about how Intapp, a business that we regard as one of the leading lights in terms of software for accountants, to talk about how they've addressed it and do a live demo as well, and a few top tips on how to get started.
There's one thing that's always really helpful. I appreciate there's quite a lot of people here today, but if you do have a question, just put it in the chat, or you can send, if you don't want it to be to everyone, you can just send us a direct message. But questions as we go along are always helpful and important. So yeah, we would definitely encourage you to do that. We don't want it always to be one way. So, and if it's at the end, we will have time for some few more live questions, but do feel free to stick things in the chat. It's always helpful.
Yeah, questions very much appreciated for sure. So one thing I spend a lot of my time doing is traveling around the country and meeting with various practices, interviewing a cross-section of staff and partners, directors, in order to understand what their specific challenges are. And there are a few recurring themes that I hear time and time again. One of the big ones is document management. And we'll come to some specifics that we hear all the time in a moment. But the journey that we try and take a practice on when we first engage with them is to help them in terms of their maturity of adopting technologies and improving their processes. So as you can see, there's a whole lot going on in this slide. But this is really important. This is really the journey that all practices ought to be on. Some are further, some are on the first few steps. But the first things you need to ensure you have in place, the things that have to be right, be presently correct, is you need to have some sort of IT leadership structure. That's a foundational aspect. You need to have all of your servers up to date and in the cloud. And the reason why that's so important is much, much easier to integrate once you've got all of your applications sitting in a cloud environment. And also it's much, much easier to administrate. So your IT spend isn't going on just keeping the lights on. It's actually moving towards more value-added, substantive stuff. Office 365. Almost every practice that I speak to now is using Office 365, but they're probably using 1–2% of what it's actually capable of. A lot more on that later. You've got to have quality IT support. You've got to ensure everybody's got quality laptops, and cybersecurity. Even though it's not a particularly glamorous subject, it should really be a line item in every single partners meeting that you have. You've got to pay attention to it. Once all of those things are in place, then you can move on to collaboration tools. So ensure you're using Teams correctly. We're going to give you some top tips on how to do that today. Move your telephony to Teams as well. Your users really should have a single location for every form of interaction, and Teams is just, it's very obviously the market leader for that. They shouldn't be switching between various applications to collaborate and communicate, both internally and externally. And lastly, the most important thing around collaboration tools is you need to move your document management system to the cloud. Once all of those things are in place, then you can move on to the really exciting things of integrating with your disparate applications, you know, CCH and Digitor and all the other applications that accountants are unfortunately have to use at present, because it's software that hasn't really been updated since the 90s, and not in a meaningful way at least. You can move on to analytics, live dashboards, both internally for utilization levels, externally for someone's portfolio, all of that sort of good stuff, and then automation and robotics, and then a digital front door, a unified portal, something that can integrate with all of your applications. So document management, the reason why it's so important is that practices today, they'll be using a variety of methods, and it doesn't matter how well disciplined you are, you're always going to be having sprawl with the systems that most practices are using today. So I don't know all of the folks who are on this webinar today, but you're bound to be using a combination of things like virtual cabinet, maybe using the correspondence tab within CCH, maybe using a bunch of shared drives as well. And that might be sort of the official, the paved road when it comes to document management. But every single practice is also going to have shadow IT. You're going to have people saving things locally to their desktop. This is a big problem. You're going to have people sharing documents even on WhatsApp between with other members of the department. This happens. People are going to be emailing their personal email address with documents in order to do certain things with them, because systems might be a little bit too locked down. And so they're creating their own desire paths. You're also going to be using Dropbox. You know, some customers want to use Dropbox. Okay, you want to provide great customer service, and so your users start using Dropbox to share files with that customer as well. And the issues that this throws up, apart from compliance and regulatory issues, is that you've got all of these different vectors that staff are using. This massively hampers their efficiency, their productivity, and it makes it much, much more difficult to actually locate these documents in the first place. So your users, when they're recording correspondence between themselves and their customers, there's generally, what I experience when I talk to practices is there's no standardized way of recording that correspondence. People aren't tagging these documents in exactly the same way as their colleagues. People aren't recording the documents in the same locations exactly the same way as their colleagues. And what this means is that when you're trying to retrieve this data again, it's far more time consuming. Time and time again, I hear about people trying to locate a document and, oh, it's not in our document management system, be it virtual cabinet or CCH Central or a myriad other systems, all the shared drives. And so they're having to ask their colleagues, oh, could you email that document to me? And then suddenly, it's only a 30-second task, no big deal. But those 30 seconds, they really do add up over the course of a year. And again, it means that when you've got a new user coming into the practice, coming into the team, well, they weren't part of that email chain. They need to ask again. It's just massively inefficient, and it's quite scary when it comes to GDPR and all that sort of thing. So once you've actually got your documents in the right place, are your users able to collaborate on those documents effectively? And again, that's something that if you're using Teams correctly, it really solves those issues. We've already talked about searching for those documents, but this is actually a much bigger problem than I've even touched on already, because searching for these documents, for one thing, the search functionality in these legacy document management systems, not that great. You might be hampered in how many records show up by default. You might be hampered by trying to do wildcard search. And of course, the documents that people are creating, are they using a standardized methodology for naming these documents in the first place? So is the document there? Is it worth searching for? Actually, it's not in VC. It's in a shared drive. So I've just been doing all these different search terms in VC. Turns out it was still on the shared drive. Oh, it's not even on the shared drive. Turns out it's in my colleague's inbox. They need to forward it to me. It's a real pig's breakfast. You want to make some comments?
No, I think what I find quite interesting about it is this concept of permanent files, working files, and other files. For me, the whole thing is crazy because why shouldn't it all just be in one place? Yeah. And we see lots of firms where their working papers is just another location, and then only the final version of the document might get uploaded somewhere. And I think for me, they're just making life much harder, and you're making searching much harder. And we've reached a maturity in the world now where you don't need to have one place for working papers, one place for a permanent file, one place for the final version of a document. It can all be one of the same. And I think the other bit that we haven't necessarily got on here is also legacy ways of working don't allow for collaboration. So, you know, if you open a document in many legacy systems, and I know lots of people here have got lots of different solutions, but I'm sure you've all seen, and maybe we'll touch on it a bit later, you know, how in Office 365, if you have a document there, you can work on it with multiple people at the same time. And so, but in the old world, you can't do that. And that can be very helpful when you're doing an audit or you're working, you know, on an SPA agreement is always a great example, because there's always a million changes and 55 different versions, and no one ever really knows where the final version is. So, you know, you've got this whole collaboration thing that's being held back as well. And it's just making life harder. You know, so many people we talk to, they just want to turn up in the morning and just open their laptop and crack on, not have to log into X, log into Y, go to here, find the document, work out which is the latest version, then open it up, and then being productive. Whereas with things like SharePoint and the Intapp we'll talk about later, it knows what your most recent document was, and as long as you've got an internet connection, off you go, it will just open it. And so there really is just making life easy for people. So there's a lot of opportunity there.
So we have this concept of the spine, and this is really the way that you ought to think about adopting Office 365 and its many components and modules to aid and assist your practice. There's a whole lot going on here. We don't have enough time to get into any depth in anything, but the important part that we're talking about today is document management. And what Intapp does, and Marc will get onto this in more detail in a moment, what Intapp does, it connects to three of the most important applications within Office 365. So it provides a layer of taxonomy, a structure to SharePoint, so you can use all of the powerful document storage and retrieval and collaboration functionality within SharePoint, gives a structure to it, provides deduplication and all of that sort of good stuff to SharePoint. So your users can start to use SharePoint without it becoming this massive sprawling pit of documents. It's also connected to Outlook, meaning that any correspondence you're having with your customer, they can be automatically stored within your document management system. They can be tagged automatically. Much easier to retrieve. If multiple people within the practice are involved in a thread, then they're all saving it to the document management system. It intelligently deduplicates. And then importantly, what we're going to go on into more depth today is it's also connected to Teams. So when your users are collaborating as a group internally, they can retrieve documents via Teams. Because Teams is, after all, just surfacing the documents which are stored in SharePoint and given the structure by Intapp. But also, when they're having a customer meeting and they want to discuss a document, they can show the document more easily on screen and even collaborate with their customers on certain elements of that document. So it becomes very powerful. Now, what takes this to the next level within 365 is that if you have your applications hosted within Azure, you can actually integrate with CCH, with Digita, with Practice Engine, with elements of Iris as well. And that means that you've got your whole list of customers and they can automatically have locations provisioned within SharePoint when that customer goes live, when you're first engaging with that customer. This means that you've got a very joined up, streamlined practice, and you can start to automate certain workflows. This slide here is the way that you need to think about adopting 365. And it goes to a whole nother level with Power BI and Practice Gateway, and if you're using Stream Collectory and cloud telephony to automate elements of timesheet creation. We could talk about this for 5 hours. It all gets very nerdy, but this is very exciting what's possible today.
Yeah, I think the only thing that's also just worth adding, probably need a line there to the practice management system as well, actually. But and I know some people on the call here have this exact problem. In Intapp, Office 365 without a governance layer is a bit of a free-for-all, and I know plenty of people on this call that this applies to, where people just go in and create stuff, and it's all a mismatch. And so what Intapp is about is putting the governance on top. and then talking to the practice management system. So when you create a client, it creates all the relevant folders and it's all templated and standardized. And I think that is absolutely critical, because otherwise we'll come on to it later, but you have this concept of team sprawl, where just stuff is just everywhere. And, you know, a lot of firms, this happened at the beginning of lockdown. They went, oh, Teams, yeah, that'll do. And then people just started creating something everywhere. So that governance is really, really critical. Conscious of time, so we need to crack on some more. Are there any very quick questions before you can either very quickly unmute or just put it in the chat if there's any quick questions before we hand over to Mark? Mark and or Matt?
Mark, yeah, thanks Dan, thanks Daniel. Thanks to TTech for once again inviting us along to another webinar. We hope you find this informative. It was a great intro by Dan, just to sort of set the scene on where things are at and where the challenges are at within accounting firms. And one of the things that we realize within Intapp, you know, especially when it comes to things like document management systems, is, you know, if you go in and you ask your staff and you ask day-to-day people who are using this technology, you know, what is it that they want in a document management system? And the reality is people don't really care as long as they can do their job. You know, I suppose where it starts to impact in people's lives is if, you know, if another app is deployed or another web page that they need to go to, another thing that they need to update and start to manage and control, then that becomes a bit of a burden, and that becomes a bit of a change management. And one of the things that we try and strive to do within Intapp with our technology stack is to remove all of those challenges, the change management issues. We just want to make sure that we can come in back end and deliver solutions that are going to work for not just across all of your firm, but each individual practice area and line that you're working on. So I'm just going to very quickly share my screen. So the key areas that we help are around sort of automating the existing processes as much as possible. But what we try and do is we try and do this in a modern, up-to-date technology stack in the form of Microsoft 365. You're already using it. And what we try and do is we help accelerate that user adoption by delivering solutions that match each of your practice line's specific ways of working and systems that they've been using from the beginning of their careers. And this is something that we hear on the ground a lot. You know, whenever, you know, we go out and we start talking to accounting firms, and what we find is you know, the tax team may be using a completely different technology stack to maybe the advisory and the audit, etc. So, you know, what we want to try and do is we want to help streamline and improve how your people are working by bringing everything together in one unified place. And we do this on top of Microsoft 365. And then because we're doing that, we're trying to ensure that you're maximizing that investment in 365, because it's not cheap. But the reality is most firms are really only touching a scratch of the Microsoft technology stack. And what we're going to try and do today is show you how you can get more out of Microsoft with our platform. And again, one of the things just to highlight, we are a Microsoft partner, so we work very closely with Microsoft. Microsoft gets most people to about 80% of where they need to go. And Microsoft have realized that there is a gap in that last 20%, and now they're working on strategic partnerships in each vertical. So Intapp are one of those strategic partnerships within accounting. So what you're about to see, you know, we're not competition for Microsoft. We work hand in hand. We actually have account plans together, etc. So we have the full backing of Microsoft when we do this. So how do we get you there? So we are focused on providing products and services that help you fully exploit 365, right? And more firms are investing in Microsoft 365. And what we're seeing is many firms have sort of reached that pivot point where they're, you know, now strongly considering what's their overall technology strategy. Should they be more aligned with Microsoft, or continue with their as-is way of working with the existing technology that they currently have? And I suppose the big thing that's driving that question as to where they should go is everyone realizes, you know, post-COVID, is there is that need to move to the cloud. And, you know, the reality is a lot of firms already have a cloud stack in the form of Microsoft 365. But what has been that barrier to this is, you know, with Microsoft 365 is, as I've said, it's usually powerful, but it only gets you so far. It's a horizontal platform, not really designed for accounting firms. Traditionally, you guys are more used to working with the likes of, CCH and Aris, and these people have been in your industry for a very, very long time. And then Microsoft doesn't really come into that consideration. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to bridge that gap. So what we provide is an application integration layer that sits on top of your own Microsoft 365 tenant that leverages the underlying storage and capability to deliver vertical use cases such as document management. And one of the key things that we're doing here is, we appreciate the fact that tax, audit, advisory all work in different ways. They all have their own little nuances. And what we don't want to try and do is try and shoehorn, a generic platform or product into these teams, and then they have to try and make them work the way they want them to work. And again, that puts people off. So what we have done with our solution is we enable you to build out pre-configured solutions for each of those business lines. And we can even actually open up this up to things like your HR department, your payroll, your IT, etc. The platform has a lot of flexibility. And what we do is with this application and integration layer, what we do is we surface up the solution to your users in a way that they already know how to use. Okay, and the products that they already know how to work. So we're not introducing a new app that they need to go to. We're surfacing this technology up in Microsoft Word, in Outlook, in Teams, in Excel, in PowerPoint, on your phone. So, your team aren't, we're not talking about introducing a completely new different application here. So just to set the scene a bit on why we're talking about Intapp workspaces and Teams for accounting firms today, it's no secret that Teams is where Microsoft are putting all their eggs. They really do see this as the future for all businesses. And, speaking to Microsoft, there's this real sort of thought process within them is that Microsoft Teams is essentially the new Windows, if you like. So it's really important that you don't get left behind within this space. However, as accounting firms have begun to sort of adopt Teams, what we've seen is a number of challenges that are starting to prevent them from making full use of that platform, or worse,
Marc,
not using it. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. A couple of people are reporting they can't see the slides. I can see them fine from both my devices, but just to be sure, do you mind stop sharing and resharing?
Of course, yeah.
Stop the spotlight. That's only the spotlight.
Does that work okay?
Hold on,
undo the spotlight.
Oh yeah, right, yeah.
Adrian and/or Linda and/or Katie, if you just unmute, is that better now?
No, Matt's picture is still kind of in front of the slide.
Yeah.
Maybe if you just.
Same problem.
Okay, maybe if I just share
Yeah, that
that
was
stuff.
You had it fine there. One sec, go back.
How's
That's
that?
fine. Yeah.
There we go. Keep it traditional. That works.
Yeah,
that's better.
It was worth a try. It's worth a try. So as I say, there are a number of challenges that are sort of preventing firms from exploiting Teams. Every firm's different, not everyone's using Teams outside of chat and meetings. We understand that. We get that. There's some, with lockdown, just went and exploded out with Teams, and it's like, this is the future, the way we're going to go. Everyone's in a different place, and hopefully for the product demonstration, we'll sort of highlight to you that, no matter where you're at in this journey, we have a solution here that's going to help you for the long-term side of things. But typically some of the challenges that we saw, especially with lockdown, is something called team sprawl, where users become aware that they can create those teams. And then what happens within the firm is you see a proliferation of teams with no clarity around purpose, content, or permissions. And this becomes a real concern for accounting firms, so you're sharing documents in Teams without any sort of security permissions, version control, etc. But then you also have a system of records somewhere. You also have your Outlooks. So then all of a sudden, this just becomes another tool where information can get lost, and it's another tool that you're having to go around search across. Oh, somebody's just waiting in the lobby. Okay, and the next thing is the. Oh, can everyone see my screen? Okay, still, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so and the next thing is the lack of support for specific practice area solutions the firm needs. So as I say, and you guys understand way more than I do, but audit, tax, advisory, everyone wants to work in their different ways. And because Microsoft doesn't offer any of this out of the box configuration for these firms, they tend to switch off and typically go and find something that does do that does meet what their firm's requirements and needs are. And now you end up with additional multiple systems for even just to do the collaboration component. So you now end up with more silos, which becomes more difficult for you to manage and gain insights into your product stack. So what we try and do with Intapp Workspaces is we try and address each of these challenges by adding key capabilities around governance, integration, and automation. And we start with the ability to template and automate the creation of Microsoft Teams that are specific to your firm and your specific practice areas, needs, and requirements. We're then able to integrate content from your line of business applications to ensure that you can use the Teams as a single pane of glass view throughout your firm. So, we're not talking about replacing all of your systems on day one. What we're trying to do, where possible, is bring them in and give you that clear view in one single application without having to jump out into different windows. And then on the back of that, we add capability that simplifies the management and permissioning of Teams, which can include integration to one of our own products called Intapp Walls. And we provide an extra layer of governance and lifecycle management of those workspaces. And I'll go into a little bit of that whenever I go into the product demo. And then for the users, we try and enhance that experience by providing hubs, which add a level of hierarchy in the support and the delivery to each practice area. And lastly, we provide a unified view of key systems and data points from across your different line of business apps, to provide that 360-degree view of your firm for your fee earners. So how does this look in practice? The good news is that it looks a lot like Teams. As I say, we're not trying to come in here and take up the real estate, get our branding in your face. We want to be a subtle product. Do what needs to be done to make your staff's day jobs a lot easier. Essentially, get out of the way, don't distract you, and deliver a simple solution. And hopefully this comes across whenever I push out into the product demonstration.
I think, Mark, a really interesting point to add now also is there is an enormous amount of research from McKinsey's and other places that says the less time you have to spend swapping applications and swapping focus, you gain good big productivity. Every time you're swapping a window into a different focus, you're losing productivity. And so having it all in one place, there's an enormous amount of research that supports this, actually makes people more productive. And especially for people who are at the more junior levels, is easier for them to understand. Yeah, and that easy of understand is really, really important. I see that a lot where people go, oh, it's just Outlook or it's just Teams. Okay, it's not something else. I think
Exactly.
A lot of feedback.
Yeah, the context switching, I think it's something like 2.1 hours per person per week, and if you multiply that by the amount of people in your firm, and the possible billable hours from that, it's quite a significant ROI. And again, if anyone wants access to the Total Economic Impact Report by Forrester on the impact of Microsoft Teams, reach out to me. More than happy to share that with you. It's readily available on the internet, but if you need to, we can certainly send that out.
Well, we'll share it in the email afterwards, Mark.
Yeah. Okay, let me just jump out to my product demonstration. Any questions just before we jump out? I was hoping for one question just so I could add lib. Well, I changed systems here, so let me just jump out to my screen. Okay, so can everyone see my screen okay? Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
Just before I move into our Teams product, I just want to recap on what we covered off in our last webinar. I appreciate that some of you guys may not have been in the last session. So again, just to highlight, we have a solution called Intapp Workspaces for Teams, but we also have a product called Intapp Documents for Outlook and SharePoint. And what Intapp Documents is it's a tool that transforms Microsoft SharePoint into a pre-positioned document management system specifically for the accountancy market. And actually, we can break that down, as I say, into each different practice areas for audits, accounts, tax advisory, etc. And then with Intapp documents, we make it super easy for you to file emails and documents into those SharePoint locations, surface this content back up to your users directly from within Outlook. And you can see here, we're not really changing how people's experience of Outlook here. It's very straightforward, very simple. As I say, we get out of the way on how your people want to work, and we're not asking them to open up different applications. But today we're going to focus on Intapp Workspaces, which is our Microsoft Teams solution. So on the screen here, you'll see a typical sort of view that you might see in Microsoft Teams. What most people are using Teams for is chat, meetings, and some firms have now started to introduce the Microsoft Teams telephony into their product portfolio. But where the real value of Microsoft Teams comes from is actually those collaboration spaces. And as I say, during lockdown, what we've seen with a lot of firms is they had a significant exponential proliferation of Microsoft Teams during lockdown. And you can see here, I've got hundreds, if not thousands, of Teams into the left-hand side here. And what we want to try and do is this becomes very noisy. If I'm a member of thousands of Teams and getting loads of notifications, it also becomes very difficult for me to sort of navigate around, find out, what each of these teams actually means. What are each of these teams doing? How are they going to help me, etc. So the first thing you'll notice about what we do with Intapp Workspaces is you'll see a row of Intapp Workspaces applications here along the left-hand side. Now, if you want to consider this for your own firm today, you're already split up into different practice areas, different lines of business, etc., different departments as well. And what we enable you to do with Intapp Workspaces is start to build out this concept of hierarchies and structures within Microsoft Teams. So here I've got one for accountancy, I've got one for deals, financial, legal, advisory. So today we're just going to focus on this accountancy one, but I just wanted for you to open your mind up and just think through what this might look like. So all of those thousands of teams that you saw me quickly scroll through at the very beginning there, what we've done is we've started to group them together into these Intapp Workspaces dashboards. So now I was scrolling through a team, I didn't really know what they meant. Now I know that I can break these into a little group called clients. So these are all my client teams. I also have a list on this tab here for all my engagements that are related to each specific client. I've got a quick view of the current status of any of these engagements, what's closed off, what's archived, what's open, what's pending, my actions, etc. So really, really useful way of bringing the chaos of teams all together into a really nice structure. And again, you can see here that we can actually break these teams out even further into their specific practice areas. Other things that we can do within these applications is we can, as we mentioned at the very beginning, Dan and Daniel has sort of talked about business intelligence reporting and Power BI. One of the things that we're able to do is we're now able to surface that business intelligence reporting up to an area within Teams that makes sense. So here I may be at my department level or my practice level, or I could be at my firm level. And as a managing partner or a partner, I can come in here very quickly and have a quick snapshot of the current health of the firm and where things are at. So I'm just going to go back very quickly into my clients. I'll show you a list of all my clients. Now, in my demo system here, I've only got a couple of teams that have been set up for my clients. The reality is, in your environment, you're probably going to have thousands of these clients, and you don't want to have a whole process of scrolling all the way down to find a client. So with Intapp Workspaces, we have our own expression search window to allow you to search across the system for a particular team, a particular client team. And again, you see how quickly that's going to return the results. But another key thing that we're doing whenever we're adding clients onto the system is we're capturing metadata properties relating to your client that then become searchable. So we can tick these properties directly from your practice management system, your upstream system. And then what we're doing is we're tagging them against the actual specific teams. And why this is important is you may have some users who are already used to going out into their CCH system or their Iris system and to search for a particular client or a particular engagement in a specific way using a specific property. And we don't want to take that away from your people. We want to make sure that they're able to continue to work in the same way that they always have. And again, if I just very quickly, let's say I take this company house number and I'm just going to use 092. So this isn't the full number, but what we're doing is we don't have to fully complete this out. So we have exceptional searching as well. So, and again, if I very quickly drill into this team, it's going to bring me and go into the client details. And you'll see here within this specific client details that within the company house number, it's all there. So it's all searchable. So very, very simple to do, very easy to use, very easy to search across.
Mark, just want to go back to that page and explain where that data has come from as well. That's important.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. I was going to do it a different way, but yeah, I can certainly do it. No, I can certainly jump down into that. So if I just scroll down, so one of the things I was just going to move in to talk about is whenever these are all teams that are created and in your system today. Whenever you create a team, there's a number of ways we can create teams. So one of the ways is by integrating to the upstream system that Dan and Daniel had sort of touched upon. Whenever we integrate to those upstream systems, what we're able to do is able to pull in those properties from your existing PMS system and tag them along that engagement. Okay, so that's one way we can do it for creating new systems. Another way that we can do this is, maybe day one we don't have that integration with your practice management system. Maybe you're in the process of moving away from on-prem to in the cloud, so you need a solution today. And one of the options we give you as well is a create button, and within that create button, users are presented with a form that they must complete before a new team is created and added into the system. So this is an example of how we're starting to govern and control Microsoft Teams. So people are no longer able to just come in, create a team for anything that they want, start to share files and documents. It's now created in a controlled and structured way. And this also applies to engagements as well. So if I were to create a new engagement, now what I'm doing here is I'm now linking a new engagement to a client team. So again, this is how we're building out these hierarchies within teams. Let's say audit 2023. And here I've got our Intapp workspaces templates. So here I've got an audit engagement template. I'm now being requested to complete additional metadata specifically relating to this type of engagement. Now, if I was working in tax, I would have a different template. If I was working in advisory, it'd be different again. I may have multiple templates within advisory. Likewise, if I was working in HR or IT, again, we have no limit in the amount of templates that you can create. But essentially, each one of these templates are pre-configured Microsoft Teams that we put together, sitting down, working with you. And these include various different tabs, different folder structures, different channels, different security permissions, and different retention policies. I'll talk a little bit about that as I move through the product demonstration.
It's also worth mentioning also that if you don't want to have to do this every year because of the annual cycle of compliance type work, you can also just automate it. So if you came up with a set of rules that says for every audit, do this every year, or for every accounts job, then you can create that cyclical nature as well if you wanted to. So you don't have to go through the whole form, which is always important.
Yeah, and again, when we're implementing this solution, we sit down with you guys and we advise on best practices. There's quite a lot of fields here that need to be completed. From a change management perspective, that puts people off. If you're asking them to fill out loads of stuff. So where possible, we try and automate these processes either by integrating to the upstream system or by limiting the amount of fields that a user has to fill out. But once we get in here, we can get very granular. We can start applying, we can add partners in as an owner. We can add members into these teams. We can also change the security level of these teams. So, the 90-10 rule within a lot of accountancy firms is 90% work is quite open, 10% is highly confidential, and we're restricted to a key group of partners. So we can actually automatically apply that when we're creating these spaces. And then we also, in terms of the lifecycle management, if a team or engagement hasn't been activated or been worked on for 6 or 12 months, we can automatically set that team to be deleted. And I'll talk a little bit about that as well. I think that I'm not going to go into too much detail here, just because it's this completely separate product and it would be a different webinar as such, is the Intapp client collaboration portal. But we also have the ability to pre-build out secure areas where clients can upload documentation. You as staff members can also upload documentation so clients can access, etc. So let me just jump out back into my my engagements, and I'll just go into my clients. So up here, I'm at my Intapp Workspaces app level. I've got my clients. If my clients area is essentially my favorites areas. These are all the active clients that I'm working on. If I wanted to add in a new client in here, it's just a simple case of subscribing, and that client's now in there, and I can just click on that and it will drill me down to that client now. Whenever I click on this, it's going to drill me down into that client team level. And just to show you, just to highlight, you can see now we're down within a typical Microsoft team. But this is created for a client. So if I'm chatting to people about this specific client, you obviously have the posts. One of the things that we're able to do with our solution is we're able to turn the chat history into a system of record. We can PDF that up. You can then output that into your document management system if needs be. Likewise, we can do that with the engagements area as well. You have the files area. So one of the things that we can do here is this is the area where you would put all your permanent files. Whenever we create these client teams, we'll work with you and we'll define what folder structures that you want in place in here. So that means that anytime you add a new client, you're working from a standardized template without you having this sort of carte blanche way of working.
Just to go back to the use case, we just jump onto the post page. I just think it's a really important point here, like particularly if you're working on an audit and you want to talk internally about that. I mean, would be interested if people just want to unmute and or comment in the chat, but like the idea here is that you're stopping either people creating their own private Teams chats that will never be seen anywhere, or internal emails or other correspondence talking about what's going on or how it's going. And so it's all about reducing the email traffic, because that's what Teams is all about, but also meaning that anyone can go in at any point in time and see what the latest conversation is or what's going on. So I think that's a really important point, just to appreciate that that's where this is the kind of gap that's filling in.
Yeah, very key. Working in context, without having to search through your emails or search through multiple systems, everything's here in one place.
Yeah, it's a good phrase.
Yeah, and then another thing, another thing that we can do as part of this template, again, we can build out these business intelligence reports. So we can now get a picture of a client. So if I'm a partner looking to evaluate a particular client and how much business we're doing with them, and what's been good about this client, what's been bad, I can use this information to build those insights. So whenever I go into my client meeting, I'm informed. And then if I just go into client engagements, again, this is an example of Intapp Workspaces hierarchy. So this is how we're building out that structure within Teams, knitting all of those teams that are in the big bucket, if you like, together into a real structure that makes it really easy for your team to go and access that information. So these are all the current active engagements that I have currently with Condoso. If I just now drill down to the engagement level, and just take a notice of these tabs here. So this client team is an example of one template. If I drill down into my audit team, so this is a completely different team. And you can see here I've got completely different tab structure, and I can have a completely different channel structure within this as well. So again, you have the full post history. You can see now that the files folder structure is a little bit different. And again, this can be as complicated or as straightforward as you want. It can be based on different types of work. And as I say, there's no limit on the number of templates that you can have within the system. Another nice feature that we can do with the template engine is when it comes to things like OneNote. So if I'm working on an engagement with a client, we're holding meetings. What we can do is we can actually template out a structure for OneNote so that everyone's filling out notes and completing them in a standardized way. So we're not having this sort of just random notes all over the place. Everything's done in quite a structured way. And this is really good, especially if you're a junior member of staff working on a particular engagement. It's a good practice to have. And it just means that if a partner needs to come in or a manager needs to come in and have a quick look at what's been happening, they can see all of the notes and history. And as I mentioned, with Microsoft Teams, it's very easy to integrate third-party systems into it, like a practice management system, like an upstream system. And then what we can do with Intapp Workspaces with our template engine is we can take the unique identifier from your practice management system, link it into the template, so that whenever I click on an engagement, I actually see that specific engagement that's already within my upstream system. So again, all about working in context. We don't want people having to jump out, open up another window, another app to get access to the information that they need. Likewise, we can even, as I say, it's all about leveraging that power of Microsoft. And again, even at the engagement level, we can have those business intelligence reports. And this is really useful for you guys, managing partners and partners, to start to build those insights into what's working well within my firm, what's not working well, how do we replicate the good, and how do we eliminate the bad. And then other things we're able to do, planner task. We appreciate that, some of the jobs that you do are very transactional, such if you're in audit, tax, etc. So one of the things that we're able to do as part of this templates, again, it's all about eliminating all of the mundane admin work that your team have to do. We just want to make things really simple for you guys. So within the planner task, we can actually template out a planner buckets and planner tasks. So if, again, if I'm a junior member of staff and I've come in, I've been assigned to this engagement, I can very quickly come into my planner and view all of the steps that need to sort of take place. As I mentioned, we can also build out our client collaboration portals into here. It's a separate topic, so we'll not go into too much detail, but we do have that capability. We're also in the middle of evaluating Microsoft Share Channels. We're doing a webinar on that next week, just on the functionality and where we see it sort of going. That should be quite useful. But at the minute, we'll talk about this in a separate session. So what I'm going to do now is move on to lifecycle management within Intapp Workspaces. And as I say, you've seen it with all of this, we're very subtly integrated into Microsoft Teams. We try and get out of the way to let your team work the way they need to work. But within every team that we create, we will have a details area, and this is where we use our lifecycle management capabilities. So through a set of status changes and workflow engine capability behind the scenes, we can actually move the flow of an engagement through its process from start all the way through to finish. Things that we're able to do, for example, if I put this engagement on hold, I said, I'm waiting on a client, and I hit confirm, right? What we can do behind the scenes here is automatically notify a partner or a manager to say, hey, this team's on hold. Do you need to take any action? Other things that we're able to do with our system is we're able to capture that on hold step and then add a plus 60 days maybe, or plus 90 days. And if this hasn't changed status within that time period, automatically send an email back around to the partner to say, hey, this has been on hold for a long time. Do you need to do anything? So we're sort of actively reminding people of certain actions that they need to take, as opposed to somebody having to go through at the end of the month and go, oh, I forgot about that. I need to do something about it. So we can prompt people, we can manage the flow of this. I'm just going to put this back into
I think while you're doing that, Mark, I think one of the things that I see, and I think this is a huge point, and I hope people appreciate this. Right now, there are just spreadsheets upon spreadsheets upon spreadsheets in every practice that we talk to around managing status. Yeah. And you've got something here that gives you the ability to completely remove all of that and then have Power BI reporting and have it centralized and do it in a much more modern and sophisticated way, as opposed to having a workflow status spreadsheet. So this is a very nice replacement for that.
Yeah. Another really powerful feature we have is this ability to close off an engagement or close out a client. And what we find with a lot of firms is they tend to hoard a lot of data because, you know, over long periods of time, you know, some stuff they need to keep, other stuff they don't know if they need to get rid of or not. So you end up hoarding this. And that's very expensive in terms of storage. It becomes a lot of noise. There's compliance issues around GDPR around that. And what we try and do is eliminate that sort of thought process for a lot of people. So whenever we close off a Microsoft team, what we can then do is if it's not been activated or worked on for, you know, 6 or 12 months, what we're then able to do is set that particular team to be archived. And I'll just go out very quickly, show you what an archive team looks like. Say production documentation is archived. So if I scroll in here, you can see this team is archived, so you can't make any more changes and the conversation has been switched off, etc. So what we're saying is whenever a team's been archived off, no one's allowed to touch it. It becomes almost a system, a system of record, which is very powerful. And then what we can also do to take this even further is if a team has been archived for, say, maybe 3 to 5 years, what we can then do is set that team to be deleted. And then we also have another tool that will then come in and enable you to come in and pull out all the key information and documentation from that particular engagement. And then what we can do is push that back up to your team within a knowledge hub. So any work that you're doing in current engagements, a lot of firms just keep that information in these little boxes that people have to go and find. But what we're trying to do with our solution is we actually can start to bring the best examples of your work to the forefront so that people who are working on any engagement are always working from the best examples.
Mark, just for people's benefit, can you just show them the files bit and how that's actually SharePoint under the hood? As in, just the 2-second version, as in click file,
Yeah.
File. Yeah, so people that don't, as in people that are familiar with SharePoint, if you click on files or this, under the hood, the button will be there. You do the files one. This is all actually SharePoint in Office 365 under the hood. You need to do files, not DMS, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah, should be able to, yeah.
Yeah, do the files one, yeah. Next to the left, yeah. Yes, if you click on any of here, can you see there in the top right, it's open in SharePoint. So for people that aren't familiar with this system, this is all just Office 365 and SharePoint, just under the hood, the normal thing that you're familiar with. And I'm sure you're all familiar with this page. Yeah, but it's just all that governance on top of it.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mark, crack on.
No, you're grand. Yeah, listen, just one last thing to show you, which is one of the features that I really like about this solution, is we have this narrative timeline window. And basically, this is your post-it notes on top of your jobs or your engagements that you're working on. So the entire history of this particular engagement, when it was opened, you know, who we're sharing content with, what meetings we're having with people, what was the outcome of those meetings, if an engagement was put on hold, the reason for that, when it was activated again. So this is really useful if I'm a partner just about to go into a meeting with a client and I need to quickly get a snapshot of where a particular job or engagement or where a particular client is at within the system.
Mark, we had a question and then I think we should open it up. So then you'll probably need to go back to Outlook, but Orwin was asking, and you can just answer it out loud if you want, about can letter and report templates be created and stored?
They can, yes. We do have, you're 100% right, Daniel. I do need to go back to Outlook and show that. Let me just share my screen. So within here, we have our precedent templates. So, you know, you could have engagement letters, etc. within here. And one of the key things that we do with our precedent documents is that, you know, if I'm working in this audit, you can see it. Just to add, this is actually the Microsoft Teams files area that I'm filing to here. But what we can do here, whenever I select those precedent documents, is we can automatically pre-fill out the various metadata fields within that document to save your team having to do those mundane tasks. I guess we can open it up to the rest of the floor for any.
If you just want to unmute or type a question, I just want to give people in the last few minutes a chance to ask any questions or comments.
How much does it cost, and what's the timescale for implementation?
Well, cost, it's the licensing banding is all different, so we'll take that one offline, and happy to share those costs with you. Yeah, and in terms of implementation, it really depends. It can be anywhere between 7 and 12 weeks. And really what that is, the way we deploy our solution is effectively we'll sit down with you, have a workshop, build out that first draft configuration, then we deploy it rapidly to your team. So the idea is we need to get your team up and using the product as quickly as possible to then start doing those refinement phases. So although a full implementation to go live might be 7 to 12 weeks, you will have users using the product, because essentially what we do is we tailor the solution around each practice area's ways of working.
Yeah, I think, Gavin, the other thing, and for everybody to be aware of, it also depends on how much data you want to migrate over. That makes a huge difference to the timeline. So some people say, what I have previously is it's just a big mess. We'll just leave it there and that will become an archive. And from day dot, we're going to start from scratch. Or other people we moved millions of documents over. But, you know, as I'm sure everyone would attest to, if I said to you, where is everything organized and nice and neat and tidy, and do you know where everything is? And if I want to move it from X to Y, do you know where that is? That takes some time. So that 7 to 12 weeks is also very dependent on your data migration strategy.
Somebody asked a question just about digital signatures. Yes, so within Intapp, we do have a tech partnership with DocuSign. And so if I wanted to send a particular document off for a client to be signed, that would go off to DocuSign. We also have an integration to Adobe Sign as well. That would go through that digital signature. Oh, sorry, I just realized I wasn't sure on my screen. That would go through that digital signature workflow. And once that happens, whenever the document has been completed, it will automatically then get pushed down into that SharePoint location. We can also have it set so it goes into a signed area as well. I don't have my DocuSign login details, but yeah.
Let's move on to other questions. I think that's important. Any other questions or comments? Mark, given we have 1 or 2 minutes, unless there's no other questions, some people here haven't seen the Outlook piece at all. So I don't know if we could just spend the last 2 minutes just showing them how you open up a document in online mode and the collaboration piece and how you file an email quickly. But I do think people will definitely get value from that.
No problem. So within the actual Teams demo, you saw that I was working with Client Condoso and Audit. This is actually a representation of that within Outlook. So again, if I right click on this and just very quickly show you what we're doing previously, this actually opens up in that SharePoint location. Okay. When it comes to documents are all stored. You can see here that we present back users a view that they're already used to seeing within Outlook. So again, we're not reinventing the wheel here for a lot of people. You'll also see here we've got a number of Word documents and I've got options here. So I've got edit online and I've got edit document. If I was to edit the document, what this is going to do is this is going to open up Microsoft on the wrong window. This is going to open up Microsoft Word and it's going to check that document out behind the scenes. You know, I can make a change to this. Let's just add that and hit exit and save. What you're going to see here is whenever I've checked this document in, now I've checked it out, this is now going to automatically change the version number of that document. We'll only ever show a single source of the truth of the latest documents, so we don't want to confuse your users with like loads of different documents of the same version. But at any time, if I need to go back and look at the previous document versions, all of that information is there. I can restore a document at any point if I make a mistake, etc. within the system. And then another key feature that what you get with Microsoft 365 is this co-authoring capability. Within Microsoft Teams, it automatically happens. Within Microsoft, within Outlook, we have this option to click a document and edit online. And essentially what this does is it checks the document out, but more than one person within the firm can come in here and make changes and edit this document. You can see here myself, I'm added in as a new user. anyone else can come in here as a new user, start working, chatting with each other. And this is really effective, you know, if you're reviewing a contract or if you're updating an audit report. It just means that we're not having this issue where somebody's checked the document out and I have to wait till they're finished. So it increases productivity. And another really useful feature that I really like about it is the amount of times that people have actually checked the document out, went home, forgot to close it. I need access to that document. What's the first thing I'm going to do? I'm going to download the document, make the edits, upload it. Now there's 2 versions of the same document out there. Which is the right one? You know, and what happens is some people have to go back and spend time reverse engineering it with different changes, etc. So co-authoring is a really, really powerful tool. And in terms of actually filing these emails and documents in, it really is a case of just simple drag and drop into those locations.
Thank you, Mark. I'm just conscious of time. So what I think we'll do is I think we'll finish because I know people need to get into their next meetings. And yeah, thank you everyone for really taking the time, and thank you, Mark and Dan, for presenting. And we will hang out here for the next 5 minutes if everyone wants to just stay behind virtually and just ask us any other questions or comments. But yeah, a big thank you for everyone for listening today. Conscious of a lot of information, we will share the slides and recording and the link that Mark was talking about earlier. And yeah, just a big thank you for taking the time to listen to us today.
Thanks, everyone.